Welcome to the Aspen Policy Series panel on what it will take for the U.S. to strengthen college excellence. My name is Tania LaViolet, and I am a Senior Program Manager with the College Excellence Program in Washington, D.C. And I'm here today to, like you, learn a little bit more about what the College Excellence Program does. We got our start in 2010, and we've grown fairly rapidly. We're now at, we're going to be at over 20 staff members serving over 10 active projects, and those projects all serve kind of one end to improve higher education, practice policy, and leadership that result in better student outcomes. So to tell us a little bit more about our program, I have two guests with me today. Joshua Wyner, who is the founder and executive director of the College Excellence Program at Aspen, where he also serves as a vice president. And our second guest needs no introduction. He is Dan Porterfield, the president and CEO of the Aspen Institute. But before assuming the presidency on June 1st, he was the president of Franklin and Marshall College for 7 years, where I think where he's best known for the Next Generation Talent Initiative strategy. So under his leadership, Franklin and Marshall was able to increase the percentage of incoming low-income students by threefold and double the percentage of students of color. He then took that success to a national stage by being one of the leading forces behind the American Talent Initiative, which we'll learn a little bit more about today. So without further ado, I'll kick things off. So Josh, the College Excellence Program, we work across the whole spectrum of higher education, from community colleges all the way to the ATI colleges and universities, the highly selective institutions. Can you tell me a little bit more about the intersection of that work?
Yeah, well, today, I think it's a great time to ask that question because, as you know, we've worked on a report today that we're releasing called The Talent Blind Spot. And one of the big challenges we have as a country is that we've grown enormously the number of community college students, right? 40% of all of the undergraduates in the country are community college students. 2/3 of those students are from lower income backgrounds, from below the average wage level in our country. And yet we haven't created the connections from 2-year to 4-year schools that we should. Most students who start in community college want a bachelor's degree. They're not there for technical training, no matter what we hear in the national political conversation. We do need stronger technical training, but for the majority, they want a bachelor's degree. And today's report, which Tania led the research behind and the authorship of, we looked at how many of those students in community colleges are graduating every year who are capable of excelling not just at any 4-year college, but at top colleges, and what happens to them. And what we found is there are 50,000 students who could do well at any college in the country who aren't graduating, who aren't transferring to any 4-year school. Not just to top 4-year schools, but to any. 15,000 of those students every year have a 3.7 average or better in community college, and they never make it to a 4-year school. So the report today is both talking about how some of the members of the American Talent Initiative, the American Talent Initiative's backdrop is 100 colleges that are competing together to increase talent in the way Dan did at Franklin and Marshall. So it's 100 colleges ranging from Elizabethtown College to Princeton University to University of Washington to UNC Chapel Hill. So it's really all of the colleges with high graduation rates in our country that are competing together to try to increase by 50,000 the number of low-income students that they enroll and graduate. So what we've done in this report today is both quantified the opportunity, the incredible number of talented lower-income students who today are in community colleges, and we've talked about how it is that some colleges like UCLA and UNC Chapel Hill and Smith College and Amherst have actually accessed community college transfers as a way to resolve this challenge and to take advantage of that opportunity.
So it's pretty cool to be the president and CEO of the Aspen Institute on any day. Great privilege, but today is an especially great day because of the importance of the report that Josh and Tania have developed. Because we can't say it enough. We can't say it in as many different ways that there's talent all over this country, north, south, east, and west. And the students who go to 2-year colleges range in age from some that are under 18, but all the way up to probably 55, 60, 70 in some cases, but certainly a lot of them are adults with families. They're not necessarily the traditional go away to college student that you associate with going to Franklin and Marshall or something, with a tremendous amount of talent, with grit and drive, determination, so much to offer. And it's a real pleasure for me to be a part of this team, the College Excellence team, working in so many different ways to affect success in college outcomes. We're just talking about this report for the moment, but they're really working in a wide range of ways for learners of every type. And I really want to congratulate you and commend you. And I think there's a great chance that this report will catalyze a lot of action, because not only do you show that the talent is there, but secondly, you point to some of the schools that have proved the possible in recruiting the graduates of two-year colleges and catapulting them into successful four-year college experiences.
So one of the main takeaways from the report, so a little bit of backdrop on the American Talent Initiative. So as Josh was saying, it's an alliance of now 100 colleges and universities, all with the highest graduation rates in the country, committing to increase opportunity for low and moderate income students. They share a goal, adding 50,000 low and moderate income students across their institutions by 2025. So of these high graduation rate colleges and universities, there are about 290 across the country. And one of the key takeaways from this report was that if we could enroll an additional 40 community college students at every single one of these 290 high graduation rate institutions, ATI would be halfway towards reaching its 50,000 by 2025 goal. So there's immense opportunity there, but that's halfway.
Yeah.
What about the other half? Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you and your team accomplished at Franklin and Marshall?
Thank you, Tania. So in 2011, I became president of Franklin Marshall College, which is a top liberal arts school located in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. About 2,400 students total in the student body, no graduate programs. It completely focuses on 18 to 22-year-olds with a few older students. And when I became president, we had a very strong school. Lots of people you've heard of have gone on to great success because it's known as an extremely challenging school. We have something like 8% of the graduates have PhDs. And so it's a hard school. There's not great inflation. It's the kind of place that's thought of as you really better be motivated to go to Franklin and Marshall College, which made it the perfect school to develop a talent strategy for going out and finding high-achieving, lower-income students. Because, of course, if those students would thrive at a research-intensive liberal arts college, that would prove that they could thrive in many other kinds of models, too, for education. So we had about 6% of the student body that was receiving federal Pell Grants, meaning their families earned something under $45,000 a year or so. And we've tripled that fast in 4 years to now a sustainable 20%. And when we tripled the percentage of student body, of Pell Grant kids in the student body, we didn't just sort of hope they would apply. We went out to top schools, what are called access programs, scholarship programs, charter schools, all around the country in order to go into the classrooms, listen to the teachers, learn about how they were working with their kids. I should say students, but most of them were young, were high school students. And then show the schools working with high promise students that Franklin and Marshall College wanted to partner with them. This was a national strategy. Some of the entities we worked with included these great public charter schools like the KIPP schools, the Uncommon schools, Yes Prep, which is in Houston, the Green Dot schools in California, the Noble schools in Chicago, truly a national outreach. But we also reached out to scholarship programs. Some of the famous ones are the Posse program, which is a nationwide program. There's one called SEO in New York City, one called College Track, one called College Match. It's our job to learn who's getting the job done. College presidents and their teams can't sit back in their offices and hope students show up. We're supposed to be the experts on young talent, so we need to get out of our offices, off our campuses, and find out where people are really teaching well. And so in doing that, then we got these great pipelines of fantastic applicants, including from rural Pennsylvania. Very important, even as we reached out, we also doubled down on our own state. We created a program called the Pennsylvania College Advising Corps, through which I now have 30 young graduates working full-time, providing college advising in mostly rural schools, some in Philadelphia, some in Lancaster, all across the state. A lot of those rural kids ended up going to Franklin and Marshall College. And so the high-level sort of result of this, sort of in terms of data, was that the grades, the graduation rates, and the retention rates of the students with the lowest family incomes were at or above the student body as a whole, point one. Point two, the faculty reported tremendous satisfaction with having a deeper student body, a higher percentage of really engaged students in class, meeting with them after class, and really wanting to do research with them in their labs and in their studies. And then third, we saw overall that the caliber of campus culture and campus life really got stronger because there were more students from more perspectives sharing experience. And so every student's college experience got stronger because of our talent strategy. So it worked for Franklin and Marshall College. And one day I had this big meeting with a potential donor. And I was laying out the case. And I was telling him about this, we had the first ever Truman Scholar winner. We had the first ever Mitchell Scholar winner. We had 2 Soros Scholar winners. We had 2 Pickering winners, all first-gen college kids. And I was laying it out. And I was laying out the data. There was no way this donor couldn't want to invest in us. And there was no argument to make. And it's better for everybody. And he said, I just wish you had scale. I wish you were Arizona State. I wish you were giant. But you're only 2,400 students. I can't invest in something that's that small. So maybe you've all heard that in your work at some point. I'm going to turn it and sort of let Josh and Tania say a little bit about the American Talent Initiative. But that was my challenge. I couldn't make Franklin and Marshall College bigger. So what could I do to take the successes of these students and their families and have those stories and the data behind it be amplified in a way that inspired and motivated more schools in a way appropriate to them to also develop talent strategies to welcome more low-income kids into their classrooms. And the way we came up with was emerged out of a series of workshops at Bloomberg Philanthropies, where we gathered up presidents, admission deans, foundation leaders, high school leaders, different types, and some students, and talked out what could it look like to try to inspire or incent, motivate more top schools to open their doors wider, to go find the talent, And to do that work, we realized we needed a partner entity to invest in because all these different colleges that might be involved couldn't pick up a national initiative themselves and run it. We had to have some entity that would do it with us as a partner. We interviewed a variety of different kinds of nonprofit entities, and it was through that interview process that I met Josh, and that we asked Josh to help run the workshops and then ultimately run the initiative that Michael Bloomberg created. And there's many great things about Josh and Tania that they know the field inside and out. They're both scholars. They're highly recognized for their insights over their careers about college success. And in addition to all that, Josh talked me through a theory of collective impact one day at that restaurant in D.C. We wrote all over the paper cloth. And I realized that he understood, and Aspen understands, that there's a certain way of working when you're trying to gather competitors together. And instead of having them be competitors against each other, be competitors to some larger social good. I think that's actually the magic of social change, is bring people together to go after a North Star that they wouldn't maybe pursue on their own. And so it really was your leadership as a thinker that helped us then figure out, well, how do we invite top colleges to open their doors more widely? And what would be the challenges that would prevent them from doing so, and how do we address those challenges? And I just want to thank the two of you, because then Josh recruited Tania, and now, as Josh said, we have 105 schools committed to our national goal, including the entire Ivy League, all these flagship public institutions, great liberal arts institutions, mid-sized ones like Stanford, Rice, Duke. All these schools have jumped on board to say, we'll help, we'll do our part. And I don't think we could have come together without the combination, on the one hand, of a visionary philanthropist in Michael Bloomberg, and on the other hand, a visionary change maker in the Aspen College Excellence Program.
Yeah, I want to jump off, if I can, on this idea of collective impact, because one of the things we know about students is that they tend to go to college within 150 miles of where it is that they went to high school. This is a really important thing to understand. Now, some of that is we've got to have people realize that you can grow up in Iowa and go to Franklin and Marshall, but that's not going to work for huge numbers of students. So the ecosystems that we've got to start thinking about are those regional ecosystems, where you've got K-12 systems, you've got community colleges. Right? We invested. We have 4,000 colleges in the country. 4,000. I mean, you can find a college, even in rural America, that's within 50 miles of you, even the most far-flung. But but if you are near a community college and not near a four-year school, and you don't have the money to start at a four-year school or don't think you do, the picture of college is going to be the community college. And so we've got these ecosystems, and then you've got the four-year schools where students can finish their undergraduate education. And we've got to create the ecosystems regionally. And I think that's one of the things that we recognize at the College Excellence Program. We're working more and more to understand what regional talent pipeline ecosystems look like. And why do we care about that? Well, we need talent for social mobility purposes, right? I mean, for the first time last year in our country, the majority of students in K-12 were reduced and free lunch kids. Think about what that means. They're poor. The majority of students in K-12 are lower income. Yeah. The majority of students in community colleges are students of color. 2/3 of the students in community colleges come from below the average income level. These are students who are working hard, who we've created access points for education, but we're not going to be able to finish the job unless we create regional ecosystems. So in addition to the American Talent Initiative, we're trying to create new networks. What are new networks look like? Well, we have transfer work that we're doing state by state by state. We're in 7 states now, working hard to have the state solve the transfer challenge across all public institutions. We're building a network of leaders, building on Aspen's great strength. So we have a program with Stanford University to train the next generation of community college presidents. And we have 24 in the field already after just 2 years who are educating 350,000 students at their institutions. A network of leaders who believe in the same things. ATI is another of these networks. So I think a lot of our work is recognizing that we need networks of regional networks. We need networks of leaders who really understand the value of doing this work. And we need partners in the work. We need Bloomberg Philanthropies. We need other philanthropies. We need like-minded organizations, other researchers and other activists, others like Steve Patrick here from Community Solutions, other programs at Aspen that we're partnering with to try to resolve these challenges.
So beyond the network and kind of expanding the ability to impact students across the country, I think one of the benefits of having this collective impact framework for working across institutions is that we can share knowledge. And so one of the key pillars of action for the American Talent Initiative, and I think this replicates itself across the programs at CEP, is this notion of the practice sharing community. And so from ATI, from the other programs that we have with CEP, what are some of the learnings that we're taking away from these communities of practice?
Yeah, I think one is that we've got to work much harder at getting faculty engaged in the work. I think that a lot of presidents I talk to are interested in how faculty deal with issues of some of the social unrest that they're seeing on campus and some of the concerns that students have, right? We have this really strong interest in knowledge creation, but it's knowledge creation in an era where people are getting their information in radically different ways. Brain science is really advancing. We know much better today how students learn than we knew a couple of decades ago. How do we engage faculty in a kind of pedagogy that takes advantage of what we know and recognizes the realities of a changing society? I think that's one of the things. And so we're working hard with a lot of our community college presidents and teams on that issue. I think the financial challenges that colleges are facing, states are disinvesting in higher ed. Where are leaders going to find the money that they need? And some of the answer has to do with making a better case, frankly. I think one of the things that's so powerful about Dan's work, and you hear it here and every time he speaks, is that he can make the case for talent. Yeah. So we've got to help presidents understand how to speak to different audiences, how to make that case, but also how to reallocate their resources away from things that aren't delivering what they need. And it's not just the climbing walls and the things you read about in U.S. News and World Report, right? It is deciding how much continuing education you need in a community college versus doubling down on offering students more calculus courses so we can get them into STEM fields. So it's these resource allocation issues. Those are the kinds of things we're really focused on.
So I'm going to sort of give a big Aspen shout out here. So you take something really important to our society. Pick anything you want, but in this case we'll pick students from any background being able to pursue the college opportunity they have earned. Okay, so wherever you are in this country, whatever kind of community you're part of, We all want our kids to get a chance to take their talents and develop them as deeply as they can, as far as they can. Nobody wants talent to be held back. No one does. So what I think that Josh and Tania have been doing, and other colleagues within the College Excellence Program, sometimes is addressing the myths that get in the way of people marshaling our resources together towards that good goal. So one myth, for example, is that, oh, it'd be great to have more low-income kids in these schools, but it'll hurt them. They can't do the work. They'll fall behind, they'll get debt, they'll drop out, we'll hurt them. This gentleman wrote a report that shows the graduation rate for students from low-income backgrounds going to high graduation rate schools is exactly the same across the sector, big schools, small schools. You bring in a low-income student to a high graduation rate school, they graduate. Another myth, oh yeah, I know they graduate, it'd be great, but you know, we can't afford this. Can't afford it. It'd be good, but we can't afford it. We're all, what can we do? We're just schools with a lot of pressures. So they put together a report in which they looked at 5 case studies of 5 different schools. One was mine, Franklin and Marshall, Richmond, University of Washington, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and Vassar. And they showed the different financial levers that the different schools pulled in order to put money into the priority of need-based financial aid. It's not rocket science, but it's not one size fits all. The way UNC found funding to increase Pell Grant students was different than the way F&M did. So they knocked down that myth. And then another myth, the third one, is, well, the students aren't there. You know, it'd be great, we can figure out the money and it's good, but they're just not out there. And so this report that you're putting out says, well, wait a minute. If you want to look at the community colleges, they are there. 50,000 students graduating a year who have proven that they can do college level work because they're graduating from a college. So this isn't even a risk, is what I think you're saying. Yep. And they complemented that by making available all this other research that was done that showed at the high school level, there's a huge number of students every single year who graduate with top grades and top test scores who don't even apply to a high graduation rate school. And so I want to just thank you, because I think that, you know, it's very like they're sly, because they think of all the reasons why someone wouldn't be able to go make change, and then they prove, look carefully, and if the case can be made that that's a myth, that there's a way to work that problem, they show what it is empirically.
Right, the other myth is that community college transfers won't do well when they get to these schools. They're not really prepared. The courses don't prepare them. Actually, prior research that we've done shows precisely the opposite. They do just as well as rising juniors in these schools, just as well as at the schools that they transfer to. Princeton looked at that and said, wow, we're going to actually let transfers in for the first time in many years.
Yeah, you hear that? Princeton University has said, Princeton, we're adding to our student body, expanding it. We're going to put in that expanded student body, community college transfers and veterans. And if Princeton can do that, you know, with the sort of legacy of elitism that associates to Ivy League schools, surely all of us can figure out what changes we should make so that more kids get the opportunity they've earned.
Yeah, I would add to that we really are in states. I just came from Oregon, where I was working with 17 community college presidents, the entire system, and all of their trustees on how is it that you make the case. How do you understand, how do you break these myths? Yeah. And how do you understand and work with one another to understand how you fundamentally shift the policies and practices at your institution. Yeah. So the technical assistance that follows from that is a lot of the work that we do. But I think you're exactly right, which is it is busting these myths, and it's helping people see through examples of excellence. We're called the College Excellence Program because we look for examples of excellence, and then we research what's done, and then we replicate that in the field through training programs and technical assistance.
Yeah, and every now and then you don't just tell the story, you create the story. Right, by helping people work together to create the results that cause them to be in education to begin with.
Yeah, I'll give you a great example. So we run something called the Aspen Prize for Community College Excellence. This was actually our founding program. It's $1 million every other year to the best community college in the country. And the reigning champion, the reigning winner of the Aspen Prize is a little school in South Dakota, Watertown, South Dakota, called Lake Area Technical Institute. Lake Area Tech has a 75% graduation rate for a 2-year college. There aren't 15% of the 4-year colleges in this country that can achieve that level of graduation. But when we confronted them the first time 7 years ago, and when we first looked at their data, they had a 70% graduation rate, but for their Pell students, it was 50%. Yeah. And they hadn't focused on that. Yeah. And we worked with them in between each prize cycle, and they've eliminated the gap. Everybody's at 74% now. And their Pell students aren't 6 or 20%, it's 40% of their student body. These are lower I went and I was the commencement speaker there after they won, and I shook their hands. And these are farm kids, first generation kids, never thought of going to college. And so they're not, these really are lower income kids who've never had this opportunity. And just by paying attention to that gap between Pell and non-Pell graduation, they closed it. And by closing it, they got the recognition of winning the Aspen Prize, which has meant that the governor now is investing more money in their institution and institutions like them, and is telling that same story before the legislature.
Can I ask a quick question? Tania, you're the moderator, but I need to ask you a question.
Sure.
So,
can I say no to the president?
I'm lucky. I've got this supercharged entity, the Aspen Institute, that you've all helped to make, that is trying to get results in all sorts of sectors. And we get all these talented people we're recruiting, who are leaders, mission-driven people that really want to get the job done. It's quite an honor to be their partner. And so I've known Tania for a couple of years through the American Talent Initiative. But could you say something about your background and why you're choosing to work in this field? Why is it important to you?
I think higher education plays a very deep role in my own story. My father was a professor at a community college. And I remember roaming the halls of this community college when I was younger and just thinking, smart people go here and work here. And he'd sneak us into summer enrollment courses, and I would learn about coding and PowerPoint and Excel back when those things were new skills. And I saw the power firsthand of community colleges in my own family, my friends who went there, and it opened up so many doors. And in my own story, going to college, from a middle income background and opening so many opportunities and doors for me, so I want the same for others. And I see the community college as an engine of that opportunity, and making connections to institutions like the ATI schools, I think is going to be a real pathway of opportunity for many, many students.
All right, so I'm going to ask you guys one more question, then we should open up. I've just totally taken the moderator role, but you're the expert. You're the expert, so I need to be enabling a little bit more of what you know to come out. So myths. People say the students aren't there. Yes, they are. The students can't do it. Yes, they can. The schools can't afford it. Yes, they can. So another myth out there is, college isn't for everybody. Too many people want to go to college. There's not going to be any jobs for all these people that go to college, get a college degree. So could you address, maybe both of you, however you do it, that myth, that somehow the economy is sending too many people to college right now?
Yeah. I remember during the presidential debates, and I won't mention who the candidate was, but there was a candidate who said, we need more welders and less philosophers. And I remember thinking that I hadn't seen a job description for a philosopher in a long time.
Yeah.
We don't have philosophers in the economy. I think there's a misconception. We're fighting over something without a difference. The fact of the matter is that in order to get ahead, you need post-secondary education. And whether that's a technical degree or whether that's a liberal arts degree that leads to graduate school, we need it. It's very clear from Georgetown University's Center for Education and the Workforce, the demand for degrees is outstripping our supply of degrees, and that's on the economic side. I think the other part of it is...
Well, slow down a second. So that means, so just say it slow. So that means that...
That means that right now about 40 or 45% of Americans have a higher ed credential, and by just a few years from now, we're going to need 60% of Americans to have a higher ed credential.
Because people are retiring, aren't they, too?
Well, part of it's people retiring, and the other thing is that demography is changing. And so the students... So in the year 2000, 12% of American high school graduates were Hispanic. It's going to be 25% in the year 2020. The unfortunate thing is we're not giving those students adequate opportunity. There's talent there, we're not activating it. So unless we shift how higher education operates, we're not going to have the talent we need to fill those jobs. I think the one other thing I'll say is that we don't need it just for jobs, we need it for our democracy. I mean, people are getting their information now through radically different sources. We have to double down on the idea of inquiry into truth and fact, and strengthen our communities. Because frankly, if our communities fall apart politically, we're not going to invest in education. That will then enable us to fill those workforce needs.
So Josh and Tania are kind of like Google. You just ask them a question and you get it. So Tania, would you say something? We never talked about this, but that research by the Stanford economist Raj Chetty says something about social mobility in college, and just in general, how have you interpreted that research? Just for this audience, what would you want them to learn about that research?
Regardless of where you go to college, there are social mobility benefits, especially for those folks who come from the lower end of the income spectrum. And so their research really makes an unassailable argument that of the positive benefits of going through higher education. It improves the lives of that individual who goes through higher education, and it improves the lives of their family generations down the line. So there's kind of that intergenerational mobility as well. But I want to pull out of the kind of the wonkiness and answer your question with a question. One of the things I find that question really frustrating. Why are we doing this? Does everyone need to go to college? Why start the conversation there? I think is what I pose to them. Why not talk about these are the benefits? This is what everyone should know about the benefits of going to college, and with people who are informed about college, with institutions making opportunity affordable, then we can talk about whether or not a person should go to college. But we have to provide an environment in which they can. The second question I would pose to them is, who are you talking about when you ask that question? Are you talking about a student who's going to a private school who has all the resources in the world available to them? Is anyone going to ask them that question?
Cool. So should we open it up?
Yes.
Sounds good. Okay.
So, thank you, Dan.
Ooh, look at this. Your call.
All right, so I'm going to start here in the front, yellow.
Hi, my name is Casey McJunkin, and I live in Truckee, California, and do college advising for first-generation students. And in general, and I haven't read the report that just came out today. But I, in general, counsel my students not to go to community college, because for low-income, students of color, I think the number I have in my head is that 14% of them go on to earn a 4-year college degree. And so there are so many barriers to them getting from starting community college to actually getting that 4-year degree that I do everything I can to counsel them to go to a 4-year university. So I guess I'd love to hear from you guys, what are those biggest obstacles that make that number 14%, and how are community colleges addressing those issues? And I guess the 4-year colleges to make sure that those kids that start on the community college track continue and actually complete their 4-year degree.
So first, if I were in your shoes, I would advise students to get to the school that gives them the best chance of success. The reality in our country, however, is that 40% of students are still going to community college. And we've known these disparities in graduation rates for a long time. So we can, on a micro level, absolutely help students make the right decisions. But unless we solve the systemic problem, we aren't going to solve it. If you were living in Northern Virginia right now, I might say, go to Northern Virginia Community College. Why? Because with George Mason, they now have dual admissions. Not just dual admissions. When you are admitted to Nova, you're admitted to George Mason at the same time. There's no better example, no better incentive for a 4-year college to take the credits than if you were already admitted, right? So I would say that as communities, we need to get 2- and 4-year colleges together. UCLA is working with East LA Community College and with Pasadena, very different schools. And they're working hard to create program maps so that the courses all transfer. The big problem is that they're not admitting students, they're not helping them with financial aid, but they're also not taking their courses. GAO found that 43% of credits are lost when students transfer from 2- to 4-year schools. So that's a huge problem. The answer is get the schools together, let's sit down, let's bust all the myths, let's get the leaders together, figure out how we can serve our community, not compete for students, and not have all of these dated assumptions about whether students are ready. Let's really look at it and do the work together. So that's a lot of what we do.
Great. Questions? Okay, right here.
So my name's Patty Alper. Met you yesterday. I've just written a book called Teach to Work. This is going to come from a completely different angle, from the business side, from the business perspective. I have just done maybe 15 interviews with huge corporations that are not finding applicants with the skills they want. So they are stepping up. They want a role. I'm doing a fireside chat with Accenture, who has spent $300 million since 2011 on creating, educating youth to come and apply for jobs. So my path has been trying to help those business people be better mentors to your students.
Fantastic.
So I'm curious how you employ mentorship and how you integrate businesses from communities in this same systemic model.
Yeah. So we're, Tanya mentioned we have 8 or 10 projects. One of our strands is on this connection from community colleges to labor market. Siemens Scholars Program, the Siemens Foundation, Siemens Corporation is very concerned about this. They find in the United States that they can't get the people in advanced manufacturing that they need. And so we've created a scholarship program which helps students who are achieving at a high level move on to get the money they need to move into these kinds of fields. We're doing research right now, so later this year we'll put out a playbook. And I think it's a two-way street. One is colleges are not responsive enough quickly, that the pace of change at college is not keeping up with the pace of change at work. Work is changing rapidly. Technology matters, but also critical thinking. Like you have to think in systems ways, and we're teaching design thinking. I mean, we really have to think about how our education enables people to work, and it's not just technical skills, it's metacognitive skills too. So we're looking at that for the college side, but the employers have a role to play too. And so in our research, they don't talk. In fact, employers don't talk to each other. One of the things that we found, they don't talk within the company. One of the things we found is that the president of the company, the HR directors, and the line managers may actually be working against purposes. So that the HR directors are demanding a bachelor's degree when the line managers have literally created a program with a community college to take an associate's, make sure the skills are learned. It's working incredibly well. They still can't find workers. But over in HR, they're still advertising for bachelor's degrees. So I think that there's work to be done on both sides, and we need to bring them together. And we need to bring them together. It's, again, the collective impact chart. What are the jobs we need, and what's the role for each side to play? What's the investment from companies in things like mentorship, in modern equipment, especially if states aren't going to invest? And then how does the community college become that talent pipeline to make sure that employers are getting what they need? So we're involved. We'd love to talk to you more about that.
One of the things you do see at the level of the four-year schools and the highly selective schools is also a recognition of the point you're making. And so the answer has been a couple strategies. One is many, many, many more internships now being funded by schools and provided in partnership with employers. And then secondly, a big strategy, this is what my school, Franklin and Marshall, did. We actually collapsed our career center into something much bigger, an Office of Student and Postgraduate Development. And we changed our focus from looking at the four-year experience to a 10-year zone of impact, where we could really continue to work with our students during the transitions from job one to job two, international travel or grad school to job one, really help each student sort of develop his or her own pathway towards the social, professional goals they had, integrating personal life and professional life. This is probably not likely to happen at the two-year college level, but at the four-year college level, at the level of the most resource schools, we're really putting much more of our resources into, I just call it sort of professional and co-curricular development. You want to take the next question?
Yes, it's on this side. Matt, your hand up for a while.
Hi, my name's Matt. I'm a Jesuit, and I'm the editor of our magazine, America. And we published a story last year that showed that if you had, I also think we need more philosophers. I also think we need better philosophers.
I agree. I agree. Actually, philosophy is correlated with really good outcomes.
Yeah.
A bachelor's in philosophy is pretty good.
I have no doubt,
Yeah.
It has for me anyway. But We published a story last year that said that if you had 2 years of what I guess we would have called in the old days vocational training at the community college level, say in dental hygiene or criminal justice or hotel restaurant management or something like that, it could at least in New England it was the difference between $8,000 and $12,000 in additional annual income,
Yeah.
right? So it was a ticket to the middle class for a lot of those folks. So I wonder how well community colleges are doing in marketing that fact to that potential population who could see the community college as an end in itself rather than a bridge to a four-year school or something else. Perhaps this is asking the same question from a different direction, but I thought I'd bring it up.
It's a great question. Look, on the one hand, we have had a rise in low-wage work, as my colleague Maureen Conway would point out. And so it used to be that a culinary degree got you a good wage. Today, not so much. And so I think one thing is that some of the programs that are legacies from an era where vocational training would lead to a decent job, it doesn't in some cases. In terms of the other programs, I think that's, when we train leaders, we ask them to look at what are the jobs at the back end, what enables you to have a better life in addition to democratic engagement. And let's align our programs to those things, whether it's transfer to a four-year school and a bachelor's or a good job, a job with family-sustaining wages. So we need leaders of institutions, is our theory, to actually understand that getting students in the front door enrollment and graduating them isn't enough. They need to understand what Dan understands and Franklin and Marshall does, which is that there's a 10-year window. And so the horizon needs to shift, but that's going to have to be done by presidents, and it's going to have to be done by leaders. There are only 4,000 colleges, right? We can have an impact on 4,000 individuals, and they can have an impact on their senior teams to raise those horizons. So I think you're exactly right. The one other thing I would say for community colleges is that the technical programs that pay the best cost the most to deliver. And so when states disinvest, it's hard to have a nursing program because you've got to have a practicum. It's hard to have an advanced manufacturing with all the equipment. So we need employers to invest, and we need states to invest. And when states disinvest in higher ed, they may drive institutions unwittingly into delivering the less remunerative degrees, and that's a cycle that spins down.
So Tania, before you call on the next person, there's a number of college students out there, because we have the greatest intern army in America working for the Aspen Institute, all paid internships, by the way. They all should be paid. But while you call on somebody, since I see Elena right here, I see Phoebe right back there. She's working, she's not supposed to ask questions. I see Lizzie and Caroline and Jonah right there. I see Donnell right there looking down. One of you has to ask a question. That's your assignment. We're going to answer another question, but then we have to have a question from people in that college experience. Okay, go ahead.
Take one from the back, the woman in the gray.
Hi, Noemi from the wonderful company, and we face these same problems about having qualified workforce. We're in the Central Valley farming, rural farming communities, and so 4 years ago we launched an ag prep high school pathway where students graduate with a college degree. And now we have 90% of them going on this fall to four-year universities. But my fear is that these four-year universities are not ready for them because they're very clear whether they want to go into ag or STEM. Almost all of them know what they want to do, and they're going into this big university with these requirements and this experience that is mostly academic and perhaps not enough learning by doing and experiential enough. So my question is, can you speak specifically about maybe the one or two high-level things, if we had the ear of our presidents, college presidents, that we could do to begin to change?
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
I'm going to do the lightning round now because we're down to the last couple things, so we want to get that college student question. I really recommend that you, and I think you're probably doing this, I know your program's very strong, that you build real relationships with people at the colleges that your kids are going to. You have to have a direct pipeline to a person, not necessarily the president, but the president can authorize it, who can get things done and cut through bureaucracy and begin to grease the gears of the good resources they no doubt have so they respond to your students' needs. And having that school by school, that direct contact person that you build a relationship with. And at Franklin and Marshall College, we are now better educating all of our students because we are learning from the mentors and educators of first-gen students what those first-gen students need. It's a dialogue, and just, I would say, build up your capacity to have that relationship, and you'll see the payoff.
And I'm going to give a quick technical answer, program maps. If the 2- and 4-year schools have program maps, what that means is a list of courses that go right down through the 4-year degree and include the 2-year equivalencies. That's what George Mason and Nova are doing right now. It's what the University of Washington has done with some of its partners. If you have those program maps, students will take the right things. They then will meet the pre-requirements for the major, and then they can go right into the major. But you have to have that clarity. So you're going to build relationships with these 2 different institutions. The question is, how do you get them to work together? The answer is you got to make the case to the 4-year school first. This matters. This matters for social mobility. It matters for the talent development in the community. We do not survive as a community if we don't activate this talent. Let's work together on that. So I think building program maps would be the technical answer. Dan gave you the interpersonal answer.
So now I see some college student hands. So let's see. There's Elena. Is there any other college student? Donnell, yeah, your hand's flicked. Yeah, so what are your 2 questions? Ask 2 questions, and we'll give an answer. We'll somehow answer them both quickly.
Okay. I know that in the higher education industry here, the research shows we all know that community colleges are places of great resource and often change lives. Oh, thank you. Of students that wouldn't otherwise have that opportunity. But from my experience with the general population and even my peers at my 4-year institution, there's kind of a stigma of being less than or not good enough if you're attending one of these schools, which is incredibly inhibitory and wrong. So how do we kind of overcome that stigma in a general sense?
All right, Donnell, what's your question?
So my question is about, you talk a little bit about the benefits of a need-based financial aid model and sort of perhaps like a more imperative for other institutions to follow it.
Okay, good. So you want to take
We'll have Tanya take the first, you take the second.
Yeah.
To answer your question, Elena, was it data on outcomes? We have multiple examples across the country that demonstrate that really capable, talented students are going into community colleges and they're succeeding there. And then demonstrating that when they transfer into even these highly selective colleges and universities, they can excel and succeed at the same pace and the same rate as their peers who started in first year. I'd say that's number 1. Number 2, I'd say in community colleges, when you look at the folks who are teaching there, they've got PhDs, they're highly qualified, they're very talented as educators. And I think we need to elevate those stories as well so people know who these students are being taught by.
So the question that Donnell asked, and Donnell he's a little bit of a ringer. He's a KIPP graduate who then I recruited to Franklin and Marshall College, much the way Kentucky recruits people that are 7 feet tall, because he's going to do great things in his life. He's a great person. And he ended up becoming student body president, and now he works for educational reform in New Orleans. And he just graduated last year. So the question was, what is need-based aid versus non-need-based, sometimes called merit aid? And it can get technical, but the bottom line is that need-based approach is the one that my school has. And it basically says, if they apply, Tanya and Josh apply, they fill out the financial aid form, and then we meet their full demonstrated financial need through the combination of a major grant, a little bit of work study, and a small loan. And we meet their full need. If you give them admission and you don't meet their full need, that's called gapping. And many schools will say, come on in, and then they're going to have to borrow on top of the guaranteed student loan. That's when you hear these horror stories. The other kind of aid, sometimes called merit aid, is when we say, well, we really don't care, Tanya, that your family doesn't need financial aid. We're going to give you money. Here, take a presidential scholarship worth $10,000, and instead of paying $50,000, you pay $40,000. So that's sometimes called merit aid or non-need-based aid. A lot of schools will offer Tanya that discount. And I'm not saying Tanya doesn't deserve to be admitted or deserve to get help and be catapulted into a great life, but they'll give her that discount so they can get the $40,000 of revenue. She could pay $50,000, but she might take her $50,000 elsewhere. If I give her a scholarship, she'll pay me $40,000. The problem with that approach is that the Joshes then, who have the need-based aid, you end up having fewer and fewer spaces to take this student. And that's where really I think a lot of private institutions have played a kind of a numbers game, a kind of a revenue game, and stopped investing in talent because they don't know how to deal with their budgets and rearrange their spending. And it's easier, it's frankly easier to tell Josh no and tell Tania yes than to deal with your budgets. That's hard, but that's I think how I see it. Regrettably, at the state level, and I really encourage you to learn about your state, a lot of the public flagship institutions are now using this same tactic. And let's say the state of badminton finds out that Tania, who lives in the state of Tiddlywinks, might apply to their school. And they say, Tania, come on in. I know our out-of-state tuition looks like it's $40,000, but we'll make it $25,000 for you. This is one reason why many of the great flagship public institutions in our country now have majority out-of-state kids. And you look it up for yourself which ones. It'll be surprising to you to see how many out-of-state kids are getting tuition discounts of the stated out-of-state price in order to subsidize operations, which all sounds great until you realize the low-income kids with talent aren't getting those opportunities.
And I will just say, Walter Isaacson documented what the University of California system did for knowledge creation in our country and in our world. Yeah. And it was the public system and the investment in that public system that drove this incredible opportunity. But it was about Californians at the time. And there's talent in every state. And so what we're losing is not just opportunity for individuals, but what we lose with that shift of funding to non-need-based aid is actually activating the talent that we're all interested in working on and would love to talk to you all more about. There were other questions. I'm glad to stick around and answer.